You had no idea why, but it worked. You were sitting on your bedroom floor with a wooden box and some colored wires and a booklet you barely understood, and the speaker made a sound, and you made that happen. Nobody helped you. Nobody told you what to do. You followed a diagram and clipped wires into metal springs, and something came alive under your hands. For the first time in your life, you understood that you could make the world do what you wanted it to. That was a science fair kit from Radioshack, and it created more engineers than any university in this country. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. The box was about the size of a board game, wooden sides, open top. Inside, on the left, was a panel covered with electronic components, each one connected to its own set of numbered metal springs. Little coiled springs that you could bend sideways with your finger to slide a wire in, and then release so the spring would pinch the wire tight and make a connection. No soldering, no tools, no glue, just your fingers and the wires and the springs. The components were color-coded. A green section for resistors and capacitors, yellow for transistors and diodes. There was a small speaker, a meter with a needle that swung left and right, a relay that clicked when you activated it, a photocell that could sense light, a solar cell that made electricity from the sun. In the bigger kits, there was an integrated circuit that looked like a small black rectangle with metal legs sticking out of it, and it was the most advanced thing you had ever touched. On the right side of the box were the wires, dozens of them, cut to different lengths, color-coded so you could tell them apart. Red wires and blue wires and green wires and yellow wires and white wires, each with a tiny tinned tip on both ends that slid perfectly into the springs. There was an earphone with a single bud that went in one ear, and there was a key, a telegraph key with a little button on a metal strip that you press to make contact, and a Morse code chart printed right on it. The first time you pressed that key and heard the tone come out of the speaker, you felt like you were sending a message to someone on the other side of the world, even though the signal went from one end of the box to the other, about 18 inches. And then there was the book. The book was everything. A thick manual, oversized, one project per page. Each page had a picture of the board showing exactly where to put each wire, a schematic diagram, a wiring chart that told you which spring numbers to connect, and an explanation of what the circuit actually did and why it worked. Not just build this, but here is what a capacitor does. Here is why this resistor has this value. Here is what happens when you change it. The book did not talk down to you. It explained things the way an adult would explain things to another adult, and you were 10 years old and you understood it because the explanation came with something you could hold in your hands and test right there on your bedroom floor. That is how learning works. Not theory first and practice later, both at the same time. Build it, hear it, see it, then understand why. The kits came in sizes. A 50-in-1 kit was where a lot of kids started. 50 different projects, enough to keep you busy for weeks. Then the 100-in-1 kit. That was the one most people remember. That was the Christmas present. The one your aunt gave you or your grandfather picked out because somebody at Radioshack told him it was the right one for a kid your age. 100 projects. AM radio, lie detector, burglar alarm, siren, electronic organ, sound effects generator, rain detector, Morse code oscillator, light activated switch, each one building on the one before it. Each one teaching you something new without ever feeling like school. Then the 150-in-1 kit and the 160-in-1 kit and the 200-in-1 kit for the kids who blew through the first 100 projects in 2 weeks and needed more. The 200-in-1 had a 7-segment LED display. It had enough components to build a digital clock, a Wheel of Fortune game, circuits that would have been graduate-level work 20 years earlier, and here they were in a wooden box on a 10-year-old's bedroom floor. But there was one project that everybody remembers. One project that changed something inside every kid who ever built it. The crystal radio. You followed the diagram. A coil of wire, a germanium diode, an earphone, an antenna wire. That was it. 4 components. No batteries, no power source of any kind. You wound the coil yourself, wrapping wire around a cardboard tube. You connected the diode. You plugged in the earphone. You took the antenna wire and clipped it to a curtain rod or a bed frame or a long piece of wire stretched across your room. Then you put the earphone in your ear and you listened. And you heard a voice. A human voice coming through a device that had no power. No batteries, no plug, nothing, just wire and a crystal and your hands. The voice was faint. You had to hold still. You had to press the earphone tight against your ear. You had to be in a quiet room with your brother nowhere near you, and the door closed, and the house as silent as a house ever gets on a Saturday afternoon. But it was there. A real voice. Coming from a real radio station somewhere in your city, or maybe a city you had never been to, traveling through the air as an invisible wave, hitting the antenna wire you had clipped to a curtain rod with an alligator clip passing through the coil. You wound yourself around a toilet paper tube, through the tiny glass diode, and arriving in your ear as sound, without a single watt of electricity from any source other than the radio wave itself. You pulled the earphone out and looked at it. You looked at the box. You looked at the curtain rod. You put the earphone back in and the voice was still there. It had not stopped. It would not stop. It was always there. It had always been there. You just never had a way to hear it until now. That was the moment. If you built a crystal radio when you were a kid, you remember that moment the way other people remember their first kiss or their first car. You remember where you were sitting. You remember which ear the earphone was in. You remember the first words you heard and the station it was, and whether it was music or talking. You remember looking at the box on the floor and looking at the curtain rod with the wire clipped to it and thinking that is impossible, that should not work. There is no power. How is there a voice in my ear? And then slowly, over the next few minutes or the next few days, you started to understand. Radio waves are real. They are everywhere. They are passing through this room right now, through the walls, through your body, through everything all the time, and you just caught one. With wire and a diode and your own hands, you were 9 years old and you had just proven that the invisible world was real. That moment created more engineers than any classroom in this country. The people who built the early internet, the people who designed the processors in your phone, the people who put rovers on Mars, a remarkable number of them will tell you the same story. It started with a science fair kit. From Radioshack, it started with a crystal radio that had no batteries. It started on a bedroom floor on a Saturday afternoon or a Christmas morning when the rest of the family was watching football and they were sitting alone with a wooden box and a booklet and a coil of wire, and something impossible happened, and after that nothing was ever the same. You remember it, 1971 or 1976 or 1982, under the tree or beside it or behind the couch where your mother hid the big presents. A rectangular box wrapped in paper. From the weight and the shape, you could tell it was not closed. You tore it open and there it was. Science Fair 100-in-1 electronic project kit. The picture on the box showed all the things you could build, and you did not read a single word because you were already pulling the lid off. You did not eat breakfast, you did not play with anything else. You carried that box to your room and you sat on the floor. You opened the manual to project number 1 and you started clipping wires. The adults ate turkey and watched football. You did not come out for 4 hours. When you finally did, your mother asked what you were doing in there. You said, "I built a radio," and she said, "That is nice." She had no idea that the thing she had just given you was going to shape the rest of your life. You went back to Radioshack the next week for more wire. Then the week after that, you went back for a resistor of a different value because you wanted to modify Project 47 and see what happened when you changed the frequency. The guy behind the counter knew you. He knew what kit you had. He knew what project you were working on. He pulled a small package off the wall, said, "Try this one," and he was right. You never forgot that. He was not a salesman. He was a retired engineer, or a ham radio operator, or a guy who had been building amplifiers since Kennedy. He knew what every single component on that wall did without looking anything up. He was your teacher, more than any teacher you had at school. He did not assign you homework. He just answered your questions, pointed at the wall, and trusted you to figure it out. Some kids went to Radioshack twice a week, 3 times. There are men in their 50s and 60s who will tell you their mother drove them there more often than to the grocery store. The staff knew them by name, saved parts for them behind the counter, and watched them grow up one project at a time. The kid who came in shy, with his mother holding his hand the first time, was coming in alone by 12, walking straight to the wall, pulling packages without asking, putting them on the counter, and saying, "I need these." The man behind the counter would look at what the kid had picked and ask, "What are you building?" The kid would explain, the man would nod, and sometimes add one more part to the pile and say, "You are going to need this too." He was always right. That was not retail. That was mentorship. That was a man passing knowledge to a child the way it had been done for centuries, not through textbooks, but through doing, through standing next to someone and saying, "Here, try this." Those kids grew up, went to college, studied electrical engineering, and came back years later and said, "You know where it all started." The man behind the counter already knew because he had watched it happen 100 times. And then it was gone. Not all at once. The way things disappear when nobody is paying attention. The kits move from the front of the store to the back, from the back to a bottom shelf, from the bottom shelf to a catalog you could order from. Then the catalog page disappeared. The component wall got smaller, then it moved to a corner, then to a single rack. The man behind the counter who knew what a capacitor was got replaced by a 20-year-old asking if you wanted to activate a Sprint plan. By 2011, half of Radioshack's revenue came from cell phones. Half. The store that taught America how to build things had become a store that sold you something someone else built, and the science fair kits, the single greatest educational toy ever sold in this country, were gone, not discontinued with an announcement, not replaced with something better, just quietly removed from the shelves and never mentioned again. What replaced them was something called snap circuits, plastic pieces with snaps that click together on a grid. No wires, no springs, no soldering, no mess, no confusion, no struggle, no learning how a component works, because the component is sealed inside a colorful plastic block, and all you do is connect it to the next block. It is safer. It is easier. It is designed to make every child succeed on the first try, and that is exactly the problem. The science fair kit was not designed for you to succeed on the first try. It was designed for you to fail, to clip the wrong wire, to burn out a component, to hear nothing in the earphone and sit there for 20 minutes staring at the diagram trying to figure out what went wrong, and then to find it, to trace the circuit, to realize you put the diode in backwards, to fix it, and to hear that voice in your ear and know that you earned it. The struggle was the lesson. The failure was the teacher, and when we removed the failure, we removed the learning. The New York Times published a STEM gift guide in 2023. They included one of the last remaining old-style electronic project kits on the market, and they recommended against buying it. The reason they gave was that the instruction manual was too complex. It dove deep into electronics concepts. It used vocabulary that required explanation. That was their objection, that it taught too much, that it expected too much, that it treated a child like someone capable of understanding something difficult if given the chance. That was the whole point. That was always the whole point. And when the newspaper of record tells parents not to buy the one toy that actually teaches their child how the world works because the manual is too hard, something has gone very wrong. The original kits are not made anymore. Not by Radioshack, which went bankrupt in 2015, not by Ramsey Electronics, which was the last company producing the classic spring terminal design. They stopped too. If you want one now, you go to eBay or a garage sale or a thrift store and you pay $50, $100, or $200 for a used wooden box with a booklet that might be missing a few pages and springs that might be bent. You hold it in your hands and you recognize it immediately. The weight of it, the smell of wood and cardboard and old electronics, the numbered springs, the color-coded wires. You recognize it the way you recognize the handwriting of someone who has been gone a long time. Somewhere in this country right now, there is a man in his 60s sitting in an office at a technology company where he makes decisions that affect millions of people. He has degrees and patents and accomplishments that fill a resume longer than most books. And if you ask him when he first knew, when he first felt in his chest that he was going to spend his life building things, he will not tell you about a class. He will not tell you about a professor. He will tell you about a bedroom floor, a wooden box, a booklet propped against his knee, a coil of wire clipped to a curtain rod, and a voice that came through an earphone that had no power. He will tell you he was 9. He will tell you it was a Saturday or maybe it was Christmas morning. And if he still has the kit, and some of them do, he keeps it in the same place they keep everything that matters. Not in the garage with the tools, not in the attic with the decorations, in the office, on the shelf, where he can see it every day, because that is where it started, and he has never forgotten. If you had a science fair kit, tell me which one, the 50, the 100, the 150, the 200. If you built the crystal radio and heard that voice with no batteries, tell me what station it was. If you spent Christmas Day on your bedroom floor while the adults watched football and you did not come out for hours, tell me what you built. If there is a man in your life who became an engineer or a scientist or a builder of any kind, and it started with a wooden box and some colored wires and a spring connector that pinched a little when you let go, tell him I made this for him. I read every single comment.